Welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm a veteran teacher with 24 years of experience, a mother of 3 adult daughters, and grandma to one-year-old boy, Grayson. On my channel, I'll be posting videos each week about instructional tips, teacher life, and work-family balance. Every week, you'll find stories that give you a glimpse into the real struggles many teachers face. You'll learn ways to deal with common teacher challenges and receive great resources you can adapt for any grade, whether it's preschool or high school. Be sure to click like and subscribe for new content, and comment below with your grade or subject area to introduce yourself. So now that you've had an overview of the basics, I want to break down the performance expectations a little bit more. And I want to do a little disclaimer here. This came from achieve.org. The slides that I'm going to show you, they have done an excellent job of breaking things down, and I will link the video underneath my video so that if you'd like to watch their video, you can. But I just really liked the way that they presented each part of the performance expectations, so I use their information in my presentation. All right, so there are 3 parts to every performance expectation. And when I say performance expectation, that's what you would think of as a standard. Like I said, it's focused on what students should know and be able to do by the end of that lesson. You have the disciplinary core ideas, so that's your content. And that's basically where we used to stop. We used to stop with the content. But now we've added science and engineering practices. So what are the students going to do with that content? And lastly, how are we going to train them to think about science that would connect to other things that they're learning in different subject areas? Here's where we start breaking down the nitty-gritty of the standards. How is this different? What we're really teaching students to do is inquiry. We're teaching them to ask questions. And that's been a topic of education for some time now. But the new reforms in math and science have really capitalized on this idea. We want students to create their own learning. We want them to be in the driver's seat. We want them to design investigations, come to conclusions on their own, and then take what they've learned and apply it to something new that they're faced with. That's what the NGSS is going to do for us in our classrooms. So let's take a look now into the 3 dimensions. There are 3 parts of each NGSS standard. We have the practices, which describe the behaviors scientists and engineers are going to be engaging in, and so our students will be practicing them. We have the disciplinary core ideas, and then we have the cross-cutting concepts. And we've talked about that being a way that we link other subject areas and also other parts of science. But I want to talk a little bit about what's that going to look like. So here's your performance expectation. Okay, this is an example, and we're going to break down the different parts. In your NGSS standards, you're going to see 3 pieces. The blue would be your science and engineering practice, the orange is your core ideas, and the green is your cross-cutting concept. So here you have MS, which means middle school, PS4, which is your big idea of science or your domain, and then 2 would be the part of that domain or standard. So you can see that in this particular standard, develop and use a model to describe that waves are reflected, absorbed, or transmitted through various materials. Here's your science and engineering practice about your scientific phenomenon. Here is your disciplinary core idea, which is waves are reflected, absorbed, or transmitted differently through different materials. And here's your cross-cutting concept, which would be that various materials have different structures and functions. You've seen structures and functions in the math curriculum if you've taught math. You've seen structures and functions worded a little bit differently in social studies, because in social studies we talk about how communities are organized, the structure of them, the function of them, things like that. So this is how it's going to help students think in a similar way that they might be thinking in their other classrooms. All right, so digging into the next part, here are your 4 domains, and you do need to understand the 4 different abbreviations for those so that when you see them in an NGSS standard that you're going to know what they are. So PS for physical sciences, and that includes energy, LS for life sciences, ESS for earth space sciences, and ETS for your engineering, technology, and your scientific applications. All right, and this just breaks it down a little bit more and helps you understand that there are pieces and parts to each one of those. And when we talk about students spiraling through these pieces and parts, this is kind of how we set it up. Especially in physical and life science, they're going to get a touch of that at different times throughout their education. And so you have matter and interaction, motion and stability and forces, energy and wave properties for physical science. Over here in life sciences, you have the structure of life from molecules to organisms. You have ecosystems, heredity, and biological evolution. And then you also have a section on earth and space science, which includes your earth and environmental, so the human impacts on the earth, as well as your Earth's place in the solar system and the systems of Earth. Then you have engineering, technology, and applications of science, engineering design, which this is really kind of goes through everything that we do the entire time that we're teaching the NGSS. And it starts at a very young age. Students at very young age, even kindergarten or preschool, can work with engineering concepts just at a very simplistic level. So now we're going to look at how the performance expectations are labeled. So I told you that right here we have a grade level or a band. In this standard, it says MS, so that stands for middle school. The middle school band is organized, it's 6th through 8th grade. So it's really not what you're doing in 6th, what you're doing in 7th, and what you're doing in 8th, but it's really what are they going to master between those 3 grades. So that's why it's considered a grade band. When you're talking about elementary school, you have individual grade levels that you're working with. High school courses would be, the standards would be set up by subject because that's how students take their high school courses. So you've got MS, that stands for your grade level or band. Then you have the PS. PS is talking about the domain, so that would be physical science in this one. Then you have 4. And the 4 is talking about your disciplinary core idea within that domain. So that's our 4th our idea of physical science. And then the 2 would just stand for the part of that disciplinary core idea. It's sort of like we had the A, B, C, and D before of our content standards when we had Common Core. This is the same thing. It's just numbers instead of letters. And that is going to also help teachers understand what are my least complex to most complex topics that I want to share with students. Things do need to be taught in a certain order with the NGSS. It's not set in stone, but when you're dealing with a particular disciplinary core idea, it does build on itself. So you want to make sure that you teach the foundational pieces or the lower numbers first and move to the higher numbers within each disciplinary core idea. Otherwise, students might get lost. All right, so let's take a look at what this is going to look like when you actually have the information in front of you. So we've got MS PS4, waves and their applications and technologies for information transfer. Within that, we have PS4.1, PS4.2, and PS4.3. Okay, so you see the different parts that performance expectation is broken down into. Right. You also have clarification statements. Highlighted here, you see that they go into a little bit more detail to explain to you what the clarification is of that particular performance expectation. So that's sort of like how we had the standards breakdown that you're used to from the Common Core. The clarification statement just breaks it down in a little bit plainer language. And then beyond the clarification statement, you have what we call assessment boundaries. And an assessment boundary, it's important to understand, is not the be-all, end-all of what you can teach in your classroom, but it's basically at what level does the student need to be able to be tested on? At what level should the student be able to show mastery on some type of performance assessment? That's your assessment boundary. All right. Then at the bottom here, you see that you have the 3 parts of the performance expectation, which are your science and engineering practices, your disciplinary core ideas, and your cross-cutting concepts. And it breaks that down into more detail so that the teacher can read through and understand what that's actually going to look like in the classroom, the core ideas that the students need to know, and how this can connect to other subjects. Going a little bit further, this is the part that I love. Down here at the bottom, you actually have standards that connect to other subject areas. So this is where in reading, in writing, and speaking and listening, and in math, that you would be connecting to this particular science standard. So this is a great way for teams to come together and to look at how can they do things in a way that students are going to be learning some of the same concepts at similar times. Or if I already know that this particular standard was taught by the reading teacher, in the previous 9 weeks, then I can say, do you remember when you learned such and such with Mrs. So-and-so? So it's a way for you to make this understandable to students by connecting to things that they already know or things that they might be learning in other classes. All right, so that's your basic overview of how to read your standards. Now you have a key that will help you sit down and start diving into all of this. Okay. As you're thinking about this, the NGSS is going to take time. As you teach any new system of learning, you have to make sure that you are relying on your resources. After all, NGSS is not meant for something for only the science teacher to do in isolation. It's really a team effort. When we're talking about helping students develop a sense of lifelong learning, and we're talking about developing wonder and inquiry, those are skills that can be utilized in every single classroom. And the NGSS is not just supposed to be for students who are going to be science majors or engineers or math majors. This is a basic literacy that all people should have by the time they graduate from high school in science. So because of that, all teachers need to understand this, whether they're a science teacher or not. They need to be thinking about how these ideas go together and what's their part in providing an integrated curriculum to students so that they can be ready for a world that we don't yet live in. Here are some things to think about when you want to shift to NGSS. We know that anytime that we do a new standards revision or we adopt anything new, we have to change our thinking before we can change what we're doing. So here are some changes that a teacher would need to make in order to make this work in their classroom. Instead of thinking about grade-specific standards, we're thinking about how this is going to be developed, how mastery is going to be developed in the different science domains over time. So between kindergarten and 12th grade, how is this vertically aligned? You need to be aware of not just your own grade level or grade level band, but you need to be aware of what comes before that and what comes after that. So you can help students regardless of whether they are right on target, whether they need some support from previous years, or whether they're ready to move on to something more challenging. This is the part that many teachers struggle with. We are so used to being the sage on stage. We are used to standing in front of our classrooms and delivering amazing lessons, and there's nothing wrong with that. There are going to be times when you need to have that balance of teacher-directed. But for the most part, NGSS is a student-directed system of learning. In NGSS, the student is not going to be just focused on content. The student's going to be focused on learning how to develop their own ideas, learning how to investigate problems, find solutions, apply those solutions to everyday things. It's, like I said before, it's not proficiency model. It's focused on mastery, so it's focused on growth over time. And one of the things that's really hard about this is that if a teacher is a very organized teacher and very used to the way that they do their curriculum throughout the year, this is going to be a little bit of a challenge in that you have to let go and let the students take some charge of what's happening. You need to be okay with things being unpredictable. It's not a predictable way to teach, because if you truly give the students the ability to be in the driver's seat, at least with some careful coaching to make sure that it doesn't get out of hand, there are going to be things that happen in your classroom that you didn't know they were going to happen. It's important to still stick with safety standards and make sure that students know, as they're investigating things, how to stay safe. But other than that, you have lots of opportunity to give students challenging projects, interesting things that are going to excite them about science. This will bring back some of the old things that you may have thought, I don't have time to do anymore because I have to teach the standards and I have to get this done by such and such a date so that my students can excel on the test. It's not so much about that anymore. It's coming around back to the idea that good learning is teaching students to be in control and take responsibility, to be accountable for what they know and for what they want to learn. And this is going to be kind of what some teachers might consider to be a messy way of teaching, but for me it's very exciting. I love when I can go into my classroom and I have something that I definitely want the students to learn, but I'm going to give them experiences. And the experiences will be a way that I can carefully lead them to the content without taking over their process. This is all about process. It's not about product. It's not about, proficiency. It's about what can they figure out for themselves that's going to make them more educated about the scientific phenomenon that exists in their real world. And how are they going to apply that in creative ways? Some of the kids sitting in your classrooms might have the cure for cancer one day. Some of them might have all kinds of hidden talents, and this type of a learning directive, it's going to bring that out in students, but only if we can step back enough to let students really have some individual control of what they're doing. So I guess as you start to adapt this, if you're a teacher that is like a very organized, very planned, very things have to happen in a certain way, you're going to have to say to yourself, okay, this is how much I'm willing to let go, and let's see what the payoff is with what students are able to do on their own. I think as you allow yourself to do that more and more and more, you're going to find out that it's going to bring so many benefits in your classroom that the risks are worth the rewards. As always, teacher safety procedures, make sure that you have those general guidelines in your classroom developed before you allow students to work with things, but give them over some of the power, give them over the ability to structure some of their own lessons, to look for some of their own resources. Don't just give them everything up front, make them ask for it. Those are the things that are going to help develop those 10 skills that we talked about that will make them successful in the world that they don't yet live in. So that is your NGSS Ocean. Okay. I hope that this was helpful to you today. This is just an introductory video, and I will link some materials down at the bottom. If you have more questions or you need help with navigating through reading some of these standards for the first time, I'm here. I'm happy to help you. I'm going to be working on drilling into some of these this summer, even though we haven't adopted them in North Carolina, because our standards have been built around the same framework, the science framework that these were designed with, and because our state did participate as a leading state in developing it, there are so many connections to the curriculum that I'm required to use, the standards I'm required to use, the essential standards and the NGSS. So as I move forward and I think about moving towards that 2026, I want to shift my instruction gradually because I have the opportunity to do that. If you're in a state that hasn't yet adopted it, that would be a smart idea for you because eventually we're going to see this everywhere. But for those people that are kind of swimming in the NGSS ocean already, I'm here for you. I'm happy to sit down and look at anything that you're struggling with, give you suggestions, bounce ideas off of each other, and think about what does your standard mean and how would I teach that. I'm here. That's what this channel is for. So post a comment in the bottom and let me know what you need, and I will put some more content on here that will help you plan for your next school year. Thanks for listening, and everybody have a great day. As always, don't forget to work hard, be kind, and amazing things.